I did a little over 30 years of hardcore blood and guts emergency medicine, day shifts, night shifts, weekends, holidays. I work clinically in healthcare for the homeless. I also was not in the military, but I was in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait after the first Gulf War on a medical team, helping the Americans with putting on oil fires. I worked on Indian reservations and wrote this book, The Better End, about end-of-life care, which Maya Angelou endorsed. But on the subject of drugs, I would ask you to look up Huffington Post and see an article by Kurt Schmoke, former mayor of Baltimore, and me, about the failure of the war on drugs. And this is sort of the medical part, is the layer on top. At least if we could, in the war on drugs, get the sick and dying off the battlefield, that would be a small step in the right direction. But I agree with everything the other panelists have said. Just to make a couple of points, people want to change consciousness. I mean, that's a human condition, and we have some sort of puritanical thing that we don't want to allow that to happen. And so we do it in a number of ways. Some are healthy and productive, like playing sports or working out, or going to play with your children, or family, or friends, maybe drinking wine, going to movies, seeing an art thing, listening to music, whatever. And, but we condemn this one area. The second thing is pick up on what Eric said. There is a book by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, which goes into great depth about the connection between this and racism. And to pick up on something Dr. McPherson said, the drug schedules 1 through 5. In 30 years of emergency medicine and in my review of the medical literature, there have been exactly 0 overdose deaths from marijuana. 0 in the history of medicine. She pointed out many more deaths from morphine, many more deaths from aspirin and Tylenol, many more deaths from other aspects of the drug trade and medicines that we prescribe. And I prescribe medicines that are far more dangerous than marijuana virtually every day of practice. And I try to make a clinical decision. Risk-benefit, communication with the patient, everything has a potential danger. But what you want to really do here in the end is get away from the dealer-patient relationship back to the doctor-patient relationship. Speaking of the drug schedules 1 through 5, it's always a note to me that phencyclidine, PCP, or angel dust, is a Schedule II drug. That's a pretty dangerous drug, and if any of you have ever dealt with it clinically, it basically makes people crazy for a long period of time, like several days. I'm not aware of its go crazy when they calm down, then they go crazy again. They also kind of get superhuman strength, but you never know when they calm down or they go on the next cycle. So you have to tie them up for 3 days or 4 days. It's very unpleasant, especially for the patient. Let me give you the status of the laws in Maryland. As I was going through my notes here, I was crossing things off because this distinguished panel said so many. So I'm going to focus on the political. And as an 18-year legislator, I guess that's, especially after the last 90 days, if you've been following the paper, that's where we live. So a couple of comments. First, in polls in Maryland, on questions, scientific polls, not polling, should we legalize marijuana for medical purposes? 50% of Republicans, 70% of Democrats, 74% of independents are unaffiliated. So what I try to tell my political friends is, look, as a candidate, I'm a Democrat, by the way, from Owings Mills, Pikesville, Randallstown area, Northwest Baltimore County. You always get your kind of core Democratic vote, and Republicans get their core Republican vote. What you're looking for is that group in the middle. Well, the group in the middle is more for this than either of the affiliated parties. But even the Republicans are 50%. And in fact, in the legislation sitting in Maryland, the lead sponsor on the House side has been me, and on the Senate side has been a Republican, Senator David Brinkley, along with Eric's friend, Senator Jamie Raskin. We've been putting in bills now for the last few years, and every year a new roadblock comes up. And it's very frustrating because the public is there, and I think the legislators are there. We have some couple of roadblocks in the legislature. But last year, 2011, we accomplished a couple of small steps. Number one, we allowed for an affirmative defense if you're caught with marijuana and you can prove to the judge or the jury, so you don't end up with a criminal conviction, which ruins people's lives. In fact, the woman who started this little video off, Sarah Ayer, said, I'll lose my pension, I'll lose my standing in the community. She's active in her church, embarrassed in front of her friends if she were to get arrested, and then still have to go through the whole rigmarole of trial, getting an attorney and so on. So we accomplished that much. We made a provision that if you're a physician and you're talking to a patient about marijuana, you can't be sanctioned by by the medical board. That was a step forward. As a practicing physician, I want to be able to discuss everything in the confidence of the doctor-patient relationship and not worry that this is going to get the patient or me in trouble on the basis of a conversation, for God's sakes. And the third thing we did is we created a medical marijuana work group. That work group met all through the end of the last calendar year up until December. It was broad-based, law enforcement, pharmacists, nurses, doctors, legislators, patients, the Secretary of Health, Dr. Sharstein. And we came up with two recommendations, two bills, House Bill 1058 and House Bill 1124. They're about 80% the same. I favor House Bill 1124 over 1058, but I put both in out of respect for the members of the work group who worked diligently on it. And what they attempted to do, as did the bills year before and the year before that, is try to make marijuana as much like a prescription drug as possible. Safe, accountable, reliable. Because still when people go out on the street, or whoever goes out there for them, are buying unknown substance from unknown people in a somewhat dangerous environment. I think one of you said, got to the middle school. I remember a lady who testified, an older woman, school teacher. Her husband had metastatic prostate cancer, and she eventually had to go back to her students with a great deal of embarrassment and humiliation because she wanted the best for her husband and begged her students who she had told don't use drugs, and now she was having to go to them in order to get some marijuana for her husband. That's the kind of situation we are putting people in, and it's insane. The bills basically were the same, and then the day of the bill hearing, Governor O'Malley announced he was going to veto anything. And that was very disheartening for a number of reasons. First, it's kind of a violation of protocol. The governor has lots of power in this state, and there's lots of ways they signal to legislators. I've done a lot of legislation over the years, that they don't like the bill. But to go to the press the day of the bill hearing was just plain disrespectful to the legislators, and more importantly, disrespectful to the many people, one being right there, who came down to testify for the bill. We met with him later. He kind of said he didn't know that that's what was going to happen, and he sort of semi-apologized in a way. The issue that he based his veto on was the thing that Eric Sterling pointed out, that there would be a prosecution of state employees, notwithstanding the fact that no one has ever been prosecuted, notwithstanding the fact that New Jersey and the District of Columbia are going to ramp up their programs before the end of this calendar year. And even if we passed our medical marijuana law, it would be 2 or 3 years down the road before it ever actually happens. And so I said to him as governor, look, if they're going to start arresting people, I don't want state employees to be arrested, but if they're going to start, we're going to see it locally. In fact, in the District of Columbia, correct me if I'm wrong there, the federal Congress has to allow, because they really control the district's laws, they had to actually allow the district to move forward on its medical marijuana program. So the federal Congress doesn't seem to care. The DEA, I'm sure, is only a few blocks away from wherever distribution center. If they want to go bust them, they will. Why don't we can ramp up our program and start the steps that we wanted to do, which allow for a controlled, growing distribution, accountability every step of the way. I do think if people want to use marijuana, they ought to be sure that it's not adulterated. It ought to be of a consistent strength. So they know how to titrate the dose and so on. Michael pointed out that the VA has relaxed rules of sorts in the 16 states. We're not one of those states. There's a VA hospital right here. I've been on staff there for 5 or 6 years, a number of years ago. So our Maryland veterans are not getting the benefit that is in other states. So I have to ask myself, really, what's the politics that's going on here? And I don't have a good answer. When President Obama, who I endorsed early and actively supported, came into office, he said, you saw the quote Dr. McPherson wrote up. And so now, a couple of years into office, the Attorney General Eric Holder said we're not going to prosecute unless there's some real serious violations going on. And now they've gone the other direction. They just arrested people in Oakland, California. They're prosecuting, and they're sending out these chilling letters. I have to agree with Eric Sterling's interpretation, but it does have this chilling effect. And in legislators, we get skittish very easily. The Judiciary Committee, which is like working in an alternate universe politically, a lot of lawyers, love you guys, but some of the arguments just get insane. So now why is that happening, and why did Governor O'Malley, who 2 years ago, put a lot of effort into championing tuition reduction for children of illegal immigrants going to college. In this last session, we spent the first 45 of the 90 days championing same-sex civil marriage, which I voted for, by the way. So why is he doing that? And then we have Dr. Sharfstein, who's the Secretary of Health, who spent part of his career as Deputy Director of the FDA, but doesn't practice medicine. And there is a distinction between doctors who practice medicine and doctors who don't practice medicine. You have, if you're a physician, you want to talk about that more, I'll go into it. But Dr. Sharfstein believes sort of in that rigid ideology of the FDA. I tried to point out that FDA occasionally makes mistakes. One is called Vioxx, you've heard of it. There's one you probably never heard of called Maceritide. Maceritide, the New England Journal recently pointed out, 10 years, $1 billion mistake. It's a worthless drug for congestive heart failure. It had the flimsiest reasons to become a drug and in heavy marketing. Even gabapentin, which Dr. McPherson referred to, was heavily and inappropriately marketed for neuropathic pain, which was billions of dollars. So why this change? And I can only speculate 3 reasons. And this is pure speculation entirely on my part. Number one, President Obama is going into an election year, and Governor O'Malley has whatever aspirations he may have, but from the president's point of view, he doesn't want another social issue. Got lots of social issues on reproductive rights and contraception and all that. Didn't want another social issue. That's theory one. Theory two, as Woodward and Bernstein said in All the President's Men, follow the money. And if you Google money laundering and drugs, you'll very quickly see that there's a lot of billions of dollars being money laundered through entities like Wachovia, Bank of America, American Express, Goldman Sachs, etc. And most of those articles aren't reported in the U.S. press. One was in Bloomberg, but the others were in The Guardian. In fact, there was a whistleblower in a British bank who said all this money pouring through here can't be legal. 5 years, for 5 years they ignored him. Finally, Wachovia paid a $150 million fine, which is a rounding error when you think of the billions of dollars involved in the drug trade. And so, there's ways people communicate to each other. You know, the great experiment in alcohol prohibition, 10 years, we all sort of know how much crime there was. We've had 40 or 50 years of the so-called war on drugs, which is kind of a war on people. How well established this is, how much money is involved. I see it when I take care of patients, because having worked at a level 2 trauma center, we have lots of drug issues and also violence related to the drug trade. And so I always ask people, you know, what do drugs cost? And $10, $20, $50 a day. You multiply that times the 60 to 80,000 addicts in the greater Baltimore metropolitan area, and you end up, times 365 at billions of dollars just in this region, not just in the city, in the region. In fact, one of the worst aspects of Katrina was the distribution lines of drugs got disrupted in New Orleans, so that created a lot more havoc. If you think about drugs as an economic enterprise, removing all moral and social and ethical issues, you have an amazing economic enterprise. There's product grown in South America and in the Far East. By the way, we get all our cocaine legally, which we use medically quite legitimately. It's grown under special licenses and brought into the United States, and all the opioids which come from the opium poppy are grown overseas and brought in under special license. So it's still plant-based medicine. So think of it this way. There's this product grown overseas. It goes through a manufacturing industrial process. Then it has to be shipped all over the world. It's a major distribution system. And down to every street corner. It's an amazing economic enterprise with quality control, security, distribution, and then, all of that money, the $5, $10 dime bags or whatever, goes all the way back up into this giant fiscal system. I mean, I took care of a patient in healthcare for the homeless who he wasn't a user, but he spent 20 years in federal prison for drug dealing. He was as smart and shrewd a businessman as I'd ever met. He ran an enormous enterprise with hundreds of employees, just happened to be in the drug trade. Could have been running IBM or Apple or anything. There he was. So what happens is the drug lords, who are ruthless, let the big banks know that there's these billions of dollars, and if marijuana becomes legal or people grow it on their own, portion of their market will go away. And so they pass the word on, and then the big banks contribute heavily to campaigns, especially national ones, and especially now after Citizens United and super PACs. And that's where candidates, including the president that I'm going to be voting for, get their money. And so money talks in politics, and big money talks really loud. And so it's easy to synchronize, the drugs, illegal, all that kind of stuff with fundraising and making that message carry across. I see it even at the little modest local level of politics that I'm at. Money goes to candidates, you need money to run for office, and it translates through. You get the message. It's not hard. You get the message on whatever the issue is. Third reason, and I'd be interested if Lynn has any ideas on this. The patent on some of this Marinol comes off this year, right? The patent on these drugs come off. Big Pharma doesn't want people to raise their own pharmaceuticals. It's probably a good thing if we don't. I don't want to grow mold to extract my own penicillin. And if I were sick, I don't think I have the horticultural skills or time to find a seed of marijuana and grow it into a plant and wait 3 to 6 months. So I think it probably is better if we have a controlled way. But Big Pharma, which makes a lot of money from drugs, and I ultimately would be happy if marijuana was moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. That would be a good thing, and then all this problem would go away. I think that's the other reason they see a lot of money in here, and they're not going to get it otherwise. It's interesting to note that Marinol, which is the active form that is Schedule 3. It's not the 1, which is dangerous, or 2, which is the opioids. It's down to 3. So that almost gives us a real sense of what you think even the FDA is inconsistent in rating what its danger is. So the whole thing becomes kind of a alternate universe, having to debate this in the context of the Maryland General Assembly and get all these crazy things, and even there people were saying, what's going on. So we ended up with the third bill, House Bill 15, Delegate Cheryl Glenn, my friend and colleague, who was the last person who spoke, and this would have afforded caregivers the same affirmative defense that patients would have. We spent hours battling through this very dense legal language. Spent a lot of time at the Judiciary Committee, and maybe some qualified for a law degree after that experience, or at least battle pay. But House Bill 50 would have done that, because if you're sick, and family member go to the drugstore, but if a family member goes out onto the street and gets marijuana and they get busted, then they're in trouble. And we talked to a lot of patients, and that was really an issue. We probably could do that. And finally, we achieved agreement. Both houses. But unfortunately, you read about the meltdown with the budget and all the other issues. That bill got behind and finally passed the House of Delegates at about 11:55 at night. At midnight, the session was over. We didn't have time to get it back over to the Senate, where they were waiting for it to pass it. And, I in fact have to in part hold the governor responsible for this one too, because all he had to do for Dr. Sharp to make a call, say move that one up on the ladder a little bit, because he was willing to sign that little bit. He was agreeable to do that. So the politics are tough. I do write every year, at least once or twice a year, the president and all my federal legislators, and FDA, the DEA, and all the other acronyms in Washington, and say, how do we move this to Schedule 2? How do we just solve this problem nationally in one fell swoop? If you read the Federal Register on why they're keeping marijuana in Schedule 1, a lot of it doesn't make any sense. It does point out that people like to listen to music when they smoke marijuana, which I thought was interesting. Point out that there actually is no association with cancer. There's an AMA article. There is no association with lung disease in long-term chronic users, because nobody smokes 20 joints a day. Very few people do, could. And so the whole thing it just doesn't make any sense. And so the challenge for all of us, or all of you, is to try to find a way to mobilize through the political system. I think it's beyond medical. I think it's beyond legal. PTSD has been around in different forms for as long as people have been fighting wars. It was called shell shock in World War I, and different terms have been applied. And you don't have to be a veteran to have PTSD. There's people who've been raped and suffered child abuse that have PTSD in different forms. So I think it's up to us in the political sphere terms of going out and voting, in terms of bombarding legislators and the governor and the Secretary of Health with letters, polite, appropriate. But it's just kind of an insane situation. And, it's very frustrating at times, but as long as I'm in the legislature, I have 2 more years on this cycle, I'll keep putting in bills, or other people will too. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you got as much out of this as I did listening.